Since we have understood the distinguishing factors of monitoring and evaluation, let us now move on to discussing monitoring frameworks used in the process. A monitoring framework provides the means for determining if a person is on the right track to achieve its objectives. It should be designed to monitor quality at different levels and for different groups. Monitoring frameworks draw on a number of different tools and components to collect and organize data needed to monitor a program's performance. Monitoring should occur both at the individual and program level. An effective monitoring plan should provide answers to several questions such as which indicators should be measured to determine what was done, how well it was done, and what was achieved. The indicator should be directly related to the expected outcome or goal. Who will collect this data and how will it be collected? This will indicate the institution or individuals responsible for the collection and the tools to be used, like checklists, forms, or surveys. How will the data flow from the locations of data collection to the stakeholders? Who will check the data quality, conduct the data analysis, draft reports, and make decisions based on the data? How will this data be managed to be accessible to those who need it? To understand the elements of a monitoring framework and how it is used, let us look at the types of monitoring frameworks. As discussed by Hutto, there are 4 basic types of monitoring that can be readily distinguished based on the nature of questions designed to address. Number 1. Surveillance monitoring. It is defined as the systematic ongoing collection, collation, and analysis of data and the timely dissemination of information to those who need to know so that action can be taken. Second is implementation monitoring, which is also known as outcome monitoring. It ensures that the program maintains fidelity to its design and helps mitigate threats to internal validity. Third is effectiveness monitoring. This type of monitoring addresses the question of how successful a project ultimately is at restoring the ecosystem or component parts. Fourth is ecological effects monitoring. It is defined as the observation of processes and indicators that shape ecosystem dynamics and structures, leading to knowledge of how ecosystems work, indicators of ecological integrity, and how they may be managed based on modeling. The 4 types of monitoring can be understood with the help of the diagram below, which explains the nature of questions involved in each type of monitoring and how it can fit into a broader adaptive management loop. If land management agencies are intending to conduct adaptive management, they will fund and seek partnerships to conduct each of the 4 types of monitoring as mentioned above. Within this framework, we will be able to understand each type. Knowledge of current land conditions emerges from the surveillance monitoring results to identify any changes over time. If current conditions seem undesirable, then the remedy may require on-the-ground activity, where things are actually happening. This will require implementation, effectiveness, and ecological effects monitoring to be conducted for the system. The starting point for the conceptual model is given in the clouds in the diagram, such as assessing the existing condition and seeing if it is okay or unknown, and what are its problematic areas, or if it needs any changes. These starting points indicate the current condition of resources, as determined through surveillance monitoring or some other kind of assessment. As seen in the diagram, implementation monitoring will be necessary to determine whether the stakeholders funded the project to be done according to the intended outcomes. Effectiveness monitoring will be necessary to determine whether the activity achieved the explicitly stated short-term and long-term goals. Lastly, ecological effects monitoring will be necessary to determine whether there were any unintended consequences that threaten the long-term ecological sustainability and biological diversity of the entire system. The arrows in between the box and the clouds indicate the results of each kind of monitoring. These results are then taken forward for discussion with the management during an annual adaptive management meeting. Here, the involved stakeholders meet with various monitoring group leaders to discuss the program questions and results. Now let us understand each type of monitoring and how they perform based on the nature of the program, beginning with surveillance monitoring. It is a method of making repeated standardized surveys so that the changes can be detected. It also uncovers and tracks the direction and magnitude of trends. Through repeated surveys over time, this type of monitoring enables the understanding of the flow of activities or behavior, which enables probable future trends. An example can be the systematic collection, analysis, and interpretation of data from time to time to bring out ways to prevent and cure diseases in remote areas. Let us now move on to the next type of monitoring called implementation monitoring. It is a type of monitoring that requires the researcher to understand the effect of a program if it has been implemented as designed. For example, we can assess whether the program reached the correct participants, the correct time, quality, or quantity. This ensures that the aspects of the program have been implemented correctly and the positive effects of the program are showing. Through this approach, the evaluators are able to avoid any incorrect conclusions or implementation of the program. There are certain indicators that are used to monitor when it comes to implementation monitoring, such as availability, uptake, quality, fidelity, and compliance, depending on the study or program.